Good evening. I'm Horace Carter, class of 1989, and I had the pleasure of serving as the Memphis University School Alumni Executive Board President. I'd like to welcome Mr. Brower and his family, our distinguished faculty emeriti, alumni, and special guests to the unveiling of the 19th portrait in a series of faculty portraits that are on display here in the dining hall in the entrance to the campus center. The portrait series was created by the Alumni Executive Board in 2005 to honor MUS faculty members who have dedicated their lives to serving our great school. The campus has transformed in many ways over the last 2 decades, but these portraits serve as a daily reminder that even though the school's physical appearance may change over time, our faculty have been unchanging in their steadfast commitment to provide the highest quality teaching, coaching, creating experiences that our alumni treasure for a lifetime. Simply put, our faculty are the foundation upon which the excellence of MUS rests. The Alumni Board determined the criteria for selecting each faculty portrait subject. To qualify, nominees cannot be current members of the faculty, and they must have served MUS for a minimum of 15 years. That there are a remarkably high number of people that meet this criteria. And having been involved in the process for a number of years now, I can attest that it is no rubber stamp. The debate over these portraits is thoughtful. It is engaged, and it is sometimes passionate. We have an impressive list of formal faculty from which to choose, and it's important to us because we love this school. And I look around this room, the people that I know here, I look at the portraits on the wall, and what it means to me. My family, both my children went here, my brothers went here. It's important to us. So, point being, this is no small thing, and it is by no means a foregone conclusion. So, this evening, we are here to honor a longtime teacher and administrator, Mr. Richard C. Brower, whom the Alumni Executive Board selected as this year's subject in the series. Tonight, you'll hear how Mr. Brower profoundly influenced MUS, his students, and fellow faculty and staff members. Unfortunately for me, fortunately for Mr. Brower, our time at MUS did not overlap, so I do not have any personal anecdotes to share, but I think that our other speakers will have that covered. That is a problem. Our first speaker this evening is our headmaster, Peter D. Sanders. Pete is now in his 7th year at MUS, where we are benefiting from his nearly 4 decades of experience as an independent school educator and administrator. At his core, he is a teacher. In addition to his myriad duties as headmaster, he also teaches a section of U.S. history to freshmen. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our distinguished headmaster, Pete Sanders.
Thank you, Horace. Welcome, everyone. We're here this evening to honor Richard C. Brower, Rick, for his 22 years of dedicated service to Memphis University School and to recognize the impact he made on the lives of decades of students and teachers as a member of our faculty and staff. We're honored to have with us his wife, Jill, daughter, Katie Park, son-in-law, his grandchildren here. Unfortunately, his sons, Copley, 96, and Peyton, I believe in Texas and England, where they are, could not make it, but I know they're here in spirit. Originally from Oregon, Rick graduated in the top 10 of his high school class of 500 before heading across the country to enroll sight unseen at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. There, he earned a bachelor's degree before heading back west to Stanford University to earn his master's of education. In the fall of 1973, Colonel Ross Lynn appointed Rick to the faculty as a lower school social studies teacher. And over the next 7 years, he also taught 8th grade music, vocabulary, photography, as well as upper school American history and government. Along the way, he also took on the role of advisor to the student-run television studio, which we did have at one time. Deciding to make a career change, Rick entered the real estate world, working in both the commercial and residential sectors of that field for 10 years. His heart for education was piqued by a one-year opening for a middle school social studies teacher at St. Mary's Episcopal School, where Katie was a student. Well, 1 year turned into 6 years. Rick remained in the classroom until 1996, when then headmaster, Mr. Hayward, Ellis Hayward, offered him the lower school principal's job that Barry Ray was vacating upon his rise to the upper school principal spot. This internal shuffle allowed Rick to return to where his teaching career began. Working at both an all-boys and then an all-girls school made for the ideal resume for a lower school principal. As Julia DeBarladen once said of Mr. Brewer, having spent 6 years at St. Mary's, he has a soft side, a gentle toughness that these lower school boys still need. When they leave his office, they leave with confidence that his door is always open to them. Similarly, new parents' concerns were erased after a meeting with him, as his calm demeanor commanded admiration and respect from both parents and students. With his previous experience as a faculty member at MUS and his perspective as an MUS parent, he certainly was a perfect fit for this role. Rick once said, "I love independent schools because of the independence. A lot of freedom, the ability to emphasize what you're good at as a teacher." As academic dean, he relied on this thought as he guided the faculty, piloting them beyond the hazards of trendy rhetoric in the classroom and encouraging them to lean on their own genuine experiences and personalities. In 2005, Rick took on this expanded role of academic dean, where he would remain until his retirement in 2011. Although he's no longer in the classroom, he filled the role of liaison to the Education Committee of the Board of Trustees. He also served the school by joining the Doors to New Opportunity Task Force in 2001, the Strategic Plan Task Force in 2004, and helming the school's course through an SAIS SACS reaccreditation process in 2010. That's a lot of work. He would later come out of retirement to serve MUS once again on the Headmaster Search Committee in 2016. I'd like to think that was successful. But it was there that I got to meet Rick, and I've just really enjoyed, Tracy and I really enjoyed getting to know him and Jill, most notably at the Iris concerts, which you had a leadership role. You were on the board there too. I should also note that Rick was on the board at St. George's School, so he's done great service to the independent school community in Memphis. We owe much to Rick Rohr for the legacy of wisdom, concern, and camaraderie he fostered as a faculty member and administrator, and the balance of scholarship, accountability, and accomplishment he provided for each student. In his various roles, he took the same approach of gently challenging one to stretch their potential with a notable level-headedness. For all of us at Memphis University School, this portrait will serve as a reminder of the numerous roles he played to encourage, strengthen, and champion our MUS community. Rick, congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Our next duo will be a portrait series first. Perhaps no one knew Rick Rohr's daily encounters or agenda better than Claire Farmer and Julia Bartolome. As his administrative assistants, these two, respectively, helped Rick navigate the waters of new students and parents for nearly a decade. Claire was the current lower school secretary when Rick assumed the role of lower school principal in 1996, and he hired Julia in 2000 based on her very unique skill set. Julia admitted in her interview with with Grover to not having a, quote, clerical bone in her body, to which he replied, "That's okay, you boys." Please welcome to the podium Ms. Farmer and Mrs. DeBarber.
Lucky for Julia that she didn't have a clear bone in her body, because she sure did a great job down there. Whoops, all my things are in the wrong order. Okay. Please stand beside me, Mama. Okay. Rick Rowe could have gotten either one of us here in front of all these people to talk about. But everybody in here knows what a terrific guy he is. Here we go. First person that laughs at me for crying. Okay. I can't think of anybody besides my dad. I'm already gonna cry. And maybe my two brothers that I respect as much as I do Rick Rowe. Here we go. I can't take any of the credit for turning him into such a fine man. That job goes to Jill and his parents. However, and I also can't take any credit for the academic dean part, which I think was a total waste, but I'll get to that in a minute. However, I do think I did a pretty darn good job of turning him into the lower school principal. We made a great team down there at the lower school. Our relationship is built on, I can't look at you, it makes me cry, on our trust, our faith in each other, our respect. In fact, I'm absolutely crazy about this guy. As for Rick, I think he just felt sorry for me in the total mess that I had made in my life at that point. If you ask any boy that had Rick as their principal when they were in the lower school, and I asked a bunch, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Rick Rowe? Few of the responses you'd expect. He is a true gentleman. We always knew he would be fair with us. He's really smart. He even gets mad. Even when he gets mad at us, he never really loses his temper. But the two of the best, one of which I'm very proud to say came from my son Ken Farmer, class of 03. And these were the great ones. Let me just also point out here that when I asked Ken to do this about Rick Rowe, in 2 minutes, this is what I got back. Now, my leg would fall off, and it would take him 2 days to get back to me. But when I asked about Rick, 2 minutes, this is what I get. He said, and I'm quoting, "Rick Rowe brought a warm and welcoming energy to NUS, a sense of honor that exemplifies the fabric and the tradition of the school, but also, I looked at Rick, I can't do that, but also a gentle humility and graciousness that eased the many middle schoolers' transition from baby birds to noble owls." Pretty darn good, right? Thank you, teachers, for doing that for him. Ben Waller, class of 07, said, "Mr. Grower is warm, understanding, and witty. He was the perfect guy in the lower school melting pot as boys tried to figure out who they wanted to be." Wow. 2 young men, years apart, pretty much the same message of what a cool guy he is. Oh, that's the last one. I lost my place here. Now, if you ask a mom about Rick Grower, the words are different, but the message is still pretty close to the same, if you really hear it all. Most of the moms I asked chose to quote Rick rather than to describe him. For instance, "Thank you for trusting us with your sons. If you drop them off with us, we will return them to you as young men." Everybody heard that one in some right? Another quote, "We have this. If we need you, we'll call you." Truth is, very few of us ever got a phone call because Rick Rowe really did have this. Any way you frame it, Rick Rowe is the epitome of what NUS means. He exudes the philosophy of this place, and he does it in a way that the boys, the parents, and even the faculty drink his Kool-Aid. Sure, Rick did a great job as academic dean, but oh, what a waste. When you're as gifted as Rick is in the art of dealing with boys, of being a shining example of our community creed, you should be walking the halls, not sitting behind the desk. You know, when you work in a school, we're all teachers, even if you never enter the classroom. And Rick is a true teacher and influencer of boys. Hundreds of young boys, when they arrive at NUS, have grown in, according to Terry Shelton, don't forget, they're not even human at that point. But eventually, they have grown into men that we're proud to call NUS alumni. And that's in large part because of the influence of Rick Rowe. His calmness, his wisdom, his gentleness, and his strength left a mark on so many. Heck, when I was younger, even I was calmer and quieter than I ever had been. Right, Barry? He just does that to people. And you know what? As smart as he is, somehow I never felt stupid around him. And that's a real gift, to make people feel like they're equal, even when we all know not many of us are his equal. Working with Rick was the best. I loved coming to work. When I got the position of Director of Alumni and Parent Programs, though, I went to Rick and I said, Rick, I got good news and I got bad news. The good news is you finally get to be the lower school principal, all by yourself. The bad news is I'm moving up to the big house. I got lost my place again. Crazy, crazy, crazy. All right, here we go. The truth is, the first time Rick walked into the lower school, he was already the lower school principal. This is when I cried. Again. Here we go. Truth and honor, scholarship, service, respect, humility, involvement, and accountability. That's our community creed given to us by the class of 01 as their senior gift. It's a statement of the ideals and virtues that best describe an MUS student. It describes Rick Rower to the T. Congratulations, Rick. This is a well-deserved honor, and I can't wait to see your portrait hanging up here with these other MUS icons. Take it away, Julia. Your turn to cry. You can do it.
I can do it.
One whole hand.
You told me to lower this and move over to the side. You can't imagine why. Rick, Jill, what a great night for you, your family, and all of us at MUS. And once again, I'm standing here in Claire's footsteps. That was a beautiful tribute, Claire. And I must say, he definitely got to be principal when I came. I can't follow with too much technical stuff, as you have described him perfectly. A teacher, principal, and above all, a gentleman. So I'm going to get a little more personal and tell you a few stories about how I got the privilege of working with Mr. Brower. Claire approached me in the early spring of 2000 on a Saturday morning at a church league basketball game. She said, I'm leaving the lower school to work in the development office. And I told Rick Brower, you were perfect for the job. I quickly thanked her and said, no, not me, and certainly not perfect. She said, just come talk to him, you'll see. So I called, I went to see him, and like the imperfect candidate, I did what you should never do. As you've been told already, I thanked Rick for seeing me, and I immediately said, don't waste a lot of time on me. I don't have a clerical bone in my body. I have no idea what he was thinking at this point. Probably shock set in. But he smiled and said, but I understand you're very good with boys. My doubts and fears were immediately calmed. Not like tonight. You see, that's what made him a great lower school principal. New boys, new parents, teachers, and even the administration. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Hagelwood?
Yes.
Yes. We all knew he spoke from his great mind, experience, and most of all, his heart. I'd only known Mr. Brewer as a parent, and I'm a rule follower, so I dropped my 7th grader off, and I trusted every single word he said to us at the parents' night the night before. I'd never really had a reason to ask to see him or for a favor. I knew I didn't get like Claire anyway. But one morning I realized that I had a PE bag in the back of my car. And I did call to see if I should bring it. And you already know what the answer was. Absolutely not. He will be just fine sitting out today. Was that true, Coach Bucky? and I bet he'll remember it tomorrow. Great advice, Mr. Brower. So let's fast forward a little bit. When I walked up the steps to the lower school office in August of 2000, I immediately felt a bit of relief. I glanced into the conference room, and the entire table was covered with yellow Post-it notes. Mr. Brower's way of putting together the boys' class schedules. I thought, well, I can move Post-it notes around. Quickly finding out that all of that information had to be put into a computer and sent to someone somewhere. Wait till you hear this. One funny story I will never forget was the day I was in the upper school office and I saw Mary Nell with her steno pad. I came back and I told Rick, I said, I think Mary Nell is practicing Chinese. Once again, in his kind, gentle voice, he said, I'm pretty sure that's shorthand. Don't worry, you won't need that down here. Gentle humility and graciousness for this non-clerical new hire. Again, thank you, Rick. Thinking back now, I'm so glad I didn't ask you to rehearse what Mary Nell was doing. Can you imagine? Rick, she would love being here to share this with you tonight. Rick spent many hours with his chair in the outer office next to me and my computer, teaching me, allowing me to learn, mess up, and start over. At some point, he was comfortable moving back to his office, and when he would hear me huffing and puffing from my desk, he would say loudly through his open door, Miss D-Bar, unplug it, wait 20 seconds, and restart it. I'm very familiar with rebooting. I have many stories to tell. One day I looked up, and he had come to visit me in the hospital. Another one is he and I enjoyed talking about the British royal family. He goes and is going often. I've only been once. Saying that to my Rick. One special example of Mr. Brower's true ability to be warm, understanding, and witty is I went into his office wringing my hands because my son, Alex, was struggling in an upper school class. Without skipping a beat, he said, Mom, he can't fall out of the basement, so let's get him down here and help him figure out what he needs to do to succeed. I stayed out of that meeting, and Alex came out smiling and said, Mr. Brower, help me see what I need to do. I've got this. You see, this is the truth. Mr. Brower, Rick Brower, lower school principal, whatever you call him, at his best. Insightful, understanding, non-judgmental. As we have repeated, his gentle humility made him who we love and trust. So Rick, I too look forward to walking by your portrait and remembering how hard we worked, but also that we had great times and made unforgettable memories. Thank you for taking the time.
I could have gotten that first without the
Thank you for taking a chance on me and giving me the opportunity to learn from your experience and guidance. I will forever be better for having worked with you. Much love and congratulations.
Thanks, y'all. That was great. We have with us tonight Dr. Steve Freckle, class of 82. While Steve has logged many hours of public speaking engagements over the past few years, none brought him as much joy as being asked to speak to you tonight about Rick Brower. recently recognized as Alumni Executive Board's Alumnus of the Year in 2020. He has served the Memphis area as a dedicated leader of the medical community with his wisdom and perspective. Steve graduated magna cum laude from Rhodes College in Memphis. It's not Sewanee, a fine school, I'm told, where he was a member of Phi Beta Kappa. He attended medical school at the University of Alabama School of Medicine in Birmingham, from which he graduated with numerous awards for outstanding achievement. He did his postgraduate training at Harvard Medical School and at Massachusetts General Hospital, where he received awards for clinical excellence. Became board certified in infectious disease in 1997 and is now a managing member of Threadgill Infectious Disease. Since 2016, Steve has served as president of the medical staff at Baptist Hospital in Memphis and serves as epidemiologist for the hospital and assistant professor for the University of Tennessee Health Science Center. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Steve Rick.
Well, first, great thanks to Horace, and I was going to be nice to him for the Sewanee remark, but we'll work on that later. And unlike you, it was his misfortune not to overlap with me. But thanks to you and the Alumni Board Executive Committee for everything you do to shepherd this program of all of us to be able to share for posterity all of these icons that we see on the wall. I got a chance to work with all except two of them, I think. And they have done such a great job in molding men who've been great servants. They've helped shape this school for what it has been for many years, for what it is today, and undoubtedly what it will be for decades to come. And they did so in molding those people, as I look around this room, as much from their example as from their teaching abilities and skills themselves. And the reach of the influence that they have had has truly been amazing, certainly throughout our community at large. And I think it's fair to say quite literally around the world, particularly if you have a package that absolutely positively has to be there overnight. I'm deeply grateful for the chance to give an anecdote or two about Rick Brower, a man whose career of influence really took two campaigns here, as we heard, both as a teacher and as an administrator. Well, I'm an older guy now, and so I have to bear witness to the skill and dedication of Rick Brower 1.0, the American government teacher, though of course, Rick, it is your prerogative to be remembered in either capacity. I had the good fortune some years ago to have a patient who was also a member of this wall, Mr. Lee McQueen, and I saw him one night in the emergency department where he sat reading a U.S. history book on United States air power in World War II. And I walked in, and I must say, he appeared a happier guy than I had remembered him when he was in the U.S. And he made a point to tell me that despite the fact that I knew him only as an administrator, that he really was not terribly fond of being the principal of the upper school and the head of discipline. He actually said to me, almost in protest, you know, before your time, I was a history teacher. People liked me. That always seemed kind of sad to me at the time, since I was an adult at the time. But I'm glad he had an opportunity to remedy that in his later years back as a history teacher, which he clearly loved. Well, people certainly liked Rick Brower. I ran into a classmate of mine last week, just by chance, and I decided to do a quick test, and I walked up to him and I said, Rorschach test. Rick Brower, go. And he said to me, oh, Mr. Brower, great guy, smart guy, great guy. And it's what we've heard from everybody. And it's what he said spontaneously. And in fact, I think upon reflection that really was the secret sauce that allowed his many other skills to take hold of all the young charges that he had under him through the years. He was at the same time urbane and extremely approachable, even as he was pitted against the most ravenous pursuers of anarchy known on the planet, 8th grade boys. But consequently, it was just simply no fun to try to disrupt anything that he did. There was nothing in it for us, so we just sat back and learned. But we liked him then as has been said several times tonight, because he was a gentleman. And he liked us. We admired him, though, because of his intellect and because of what he expected from us. He taught concepts that were quite demanding at the 8th grade level. He taught those concepts and made us memorize facts that went way beyond what you would typically see at that level of education. Most kids didn't learn those things then, and certainly they don't know them now. He maintained that so much of the richness of our history and the complexity and genius of the American government was really lost on the average American citizen. We learned about robber barons and how a bill becomes a law in far greater detail, I must say, than the Schoolhouse Rock, Lonely Bill Sitting on Capitol Hill song that became so popular. My crack research team got to work and actually uncovered through the piles of information of our education, uncovered some of our actual essay questions, such as describe how the constitutional amendment process is an example of federalism. We learned of House reapportionment and the salaries of congressional representatives. It says something about Rick Brower, the idealist, however, that he did not, or he skipped right over, I should say, that many of them were able to augment their actual salaries with additional monies and payments in kind. My close friend and advisor on nearly all things, Robert Davis, one of my classmates, majored in government at Princeton, in no small part because of the influence of Rick Brower on his education, citing him as the finest teacher he ever had on that subject at any level. And he reported that a significant proportion of the introduction to government class at Princeton University was simply material that had already been fully covered in his 8th grade government class 5 years before. Robert was always a sucker for an easy A, I think. I recall vividly one day when we drew names out of a hat of US presidents to write a paper, a 3-page paper, on the life and significance of those people. I drew Millard Fillmore, a man who was at one time nominated by the American Know-Nothing Party, a man whose final, immortal last words have inspired so many over the years over his meal, "This nourishment is palatable." But in fairness, he was the last president not to be associated with either the Republican or the Democratic Party, so he did have that going for him. In fairness, and Rick actually took me aside when I must have looked, as if I'd been shot, I had received an electric shock when I pulled out Millard Fillmore, and he said, "Son, you don't know it, but you just won the lottery, because you can take 3 pages and tell the entire life and times of Millard Fillmore. Think what the poor guys at Washington and Lincoln have to do the next 4 or 7." Well, but I actually have been grateful for that over the years. Just a couple of weeks ago, I did a little experiment in preparation for tonight. I went to a supposedly educated crew in an intensive care unit, one of the hospitals around town, and I asked, simply, have you ever heard the name Millard Fillmore? To my horror, only one person, this fairly large group of people, had ever heard the name, though I did begrudgingly give half credit to a young nurse who said to me, "Isn't that a comic strip?" Sometimes it's hard to be optimistic about the youth of today. So when recounting this trauma to Mr. Brower on the phone, a few days ago, he responded with a vintage Rick Brower maneuver, a long, thoughtful pause followed by, "You're welcome." And finally, about Rick Brower, the teacher, he had a particular predilection for teaching vocabulary words. I didn't know that he later taught a vocabulary class. This doesn't shock me at all, because he taught us vocabulary throughout this course. Some related to government, and some just because he thought we should know those words in our lives. So if you found a few words during my remarks slightly awkward or affected at all, just because of the context, realize that as a small tribute to Mr. Brower, I included, if not cogently, some of the actual vocabulary words, again, from my crack research team assembled after 46 years. Posterity, anecdote, prerogative, ravenous, anarchy, urbane, and of course, cogent. I have only one disappointment as regards Rick Brower. He only really let us down once. Sure, over the 44 years we have traveled since, I've forgiven. But several of us were eager to take his 11th grade government class as juniors, but he left in U.S. after the spring of 1980 to make his way in the civilian world. But alas, he did maintain his love of education, and he came back to the U.S., as we have heard, later as administrator of the lower school. We've also heard in just loving detail, in a great job, how beloved an administrator he was, just as he had been a teacher. I don't know if he was happier as a social studies teacher or as administrator, because of course I only heard about Rick Brower 2.0. By then I was long gone, forging my own way in young adult life, but my classmates and I were able to do that, much as we've heard about the kids we've heard about tonight as well, with more knowledge, more confidence, and I'd like to hope a kinder demeanor, because of the good fortune to have been under the instruction of Rick Brower. Albert Einstein once said, setting an example is not the main means of influencing others. It is the only means. Rick Brower, like all of the other educators in these portraits around this room, helped mold a generation of young men. And also, like his peers in these portraits, and many in this room tonight, he did it by his teaching, to be sure, but he did it much more by his example. Rick, congratulations on it. It's great.
Thank you, Dr. Threckle. Also nourishment indeed. The portrait of Mr. Brower is the work of Birmingham artist Carter Laney, whose work can be found in both private and professional collections across the South, including landscapes, still life, and portraiture. Mr. Laney's preferred medium is oil on canvas, as has been selected for Mr. Brower's portrait. He trained professionally under artist Mark Crater and has worked to master the use of focus and light to capture the personality of the subject. In his own words, he is driven to make each consecutive portrait the best he has ever done. We are pleased to be adding Mr. Laney's work to our growing collection. Unfortunately, Mr. Laney cannot be with us this evening. He's represented locally by Mrs. Elizabeth Francis, a broker for Portraits Incorporated. Now I would like to ask Jill and Rick to join Mr. Sanders and me as we unveil the portrait.
I guess if Julie and Claire can get through it, I can do it too, right? Good. Thank you all so much for being here. I am going to be brief. I have promised that, and I will fulfill. I have to say this is an honor that I truly never expected. I am extremely grateful and proud and humbled to be included in this great series of faculty portraits. It's one of the many important traditions that we have at this great school. As I look at the portraits, I'm in awe to be included. And it strikes me that there are 18 of them, and I knew them all and worked with them all and learned from them all. A wonderful experience. Special thanks to Ted Simpson, the past president of the Alumni Executive Board, and to Horace, the current one, and to the entire board, Alumni Executive Board, for sponsoring this series and for honoring me this way. I owe thanks to many, many people for supporting and helping me in my life. A lot of you in this room included, and I hope each and every one of them knows who they are and how grateful I am. Whatever success I've had is because of those good people. Family, colleagues, mentors, friends. And of course, I'm especially grateful for the support and encouragement given to me by Jill. My deepest thanks go to Claire, Julia, and Steve for speaking this evening. I know from experience that that's a lot of work, and it isn't an easy task, and I sincerely appreciate your words. As you know, MUS is a special place. It's more than a school. It's a community, it's a family. Students, alumni, current and former faculty and staff, parents, grandparents, and friends of students and alums, we're all part of that family. And I hope that for all of you in that family, the words that John Springfield, who's right over there, wrote back in 1960 as the opening line of the MUS hymn are as meaningful as they are for me. Dear MUS, how kind the fate that brought us to these halls. Thank you.
All right, on behalf of the Alumni Board, thank you very much for coming this evening to Mr. Brower, and please feel free to stick around and say hello and visit for a while.